So we was reviewing the whole entire Dylan Mulvaney situation. So now I'm going to show you the clip of, Joe Biden having a meeting with Dylan Mulvaney in this conversation about girlhood, transitioning, and all this other stuff, man. And later on, this goes into a discussion I had a while back, where, in my opinion, this is all about a society of emasculating the man, and defeminizing the woman. But the more so than not, I think a lot of brothers and a lot of men start to understand this is primarily a conversation on uh, removing this idea of patriarchy, which is nothing more but a code word for saying removing manhood, because manhood is a threat. You understand? The idea of masculinity is not to be honored because it shows authority. So when you have that type of authority, it needs to be taken away so that this society could actually have a quote unquote open mind to everything else, which is more or less witchcraft and all these different things that follow around with it, black magic, and a lot of different things for sure that the society is well known for putting out in the forefront. But I'm going to show you this video. Before I begin, like and subscribe. Thank you. Fair use.
We're going to move on now to trans rights. There have been many anti-LGBTQ plus bills introduced and enacted, outlawing things like gender-affirming healthcare and banning kids from playing sports. To go deeper into this issue, here with us today is Dylan Mulvaney, who's welcomed us into her life by, showing on social media her Girlhood series. Let's take a look.
My name is Dylan Mulvaney. I am a trans woman, and I am documenting my transition publicly on TikTok for the world to see. When people started watching and the numbers kept getting higher, I realized quickly how public my transition would be. Of course, I knew that there would be backlash and negativity. I try to not let the internet's words hurt me or my spirit. But do you know what does hurt? Seeing people in power and authority figures creating laws and bills that are actively trying to harm us trans humans, especially trans children. Our lives have become political talking points. Lawmakers in many states want to exclude us from participating in sports or getting proper health care.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is something you can expect in general. You walking around, and first of all, you're doing it in the right country, because America has no problem with you in this imaginary, be free with the world type of rhetoric. You understand? But the thing about it is that, yeah, certain states really hold on to their traditional Christian values. And they say, yo, it's a red state. You don't do that over here. We believe in the Bible. We are a Bible carrying state. You are not allowed to sit up there and bring your agendas out here. And, slowly but surely, what I think America is going to do, because this is how they roll it, even though it seems as if every state operates as their own country, more than likely, they're going to try to formulate every single type of crux of this transgender identity politics into their state. And there'll at least be like maybe 5 to 10 counties that turn blue or something like that within their home state. I mean, this is just me just imagining. I'm not sitting up there saying like I know the politics like that, but it's amazing because look at how Texas was. Texas, they used to say is a red state. Now all of a sudden they say, oh, it's so liberal here, because more people is moving out to Texas, and they sit up there saying, yeah, it's a blue state now. It's slowly becoming a blue state. So I'm just trying to envision what is really going to happen when more of this stuff with the bills getting passed and all this other stuff, how it's going to be taken. Because we can't just blame Joe Biden as if he's the one that's to blame for pushing this out here. He's just doing a job. He's just doing what he's told to do. Just like when it came to Obama. Obama was the threshold of getting that whole entire act in place so that everybody could start becoming desensitized to conversations just like this. You understand?
Some folks want to decide where we can use the bathroom. No one should have fear living in a state that they call home while being true to themselves. No one should have their lives put in danger because of who they are inside. That's why I'm sharing my story with the world. I'm using my platform to stand up for my community and for any of the little Dylans that deserve a clear path to their true identity.
And before Joe Biden begins, and that the guy that's speaking is going to begin, this is the funny thing that I relate to the X effect. And what I mean by the X effect, there's different responses to this whole entire political stance on how someone should use the bathroom. Well, where should someone should use the bathroom in terms of gender, right? So this is the thing. Usually the complaint is widely about transgender women going into women's bathrooms, right? And so women feel uncomfortable naturally. You know what I mean? They like their privacy. They don't like to be, feel like it's an uncomfortable spot. Whereas trans men feel a little bit insecure, feel widely insecure about going to men's bathrooms, right? Because with men, we take out phallus, we go ahead and piss in the toilet, do what we need to do, whatever. But with the trans man is a different story because they're like, well, I don't really have that, or, I have to get used to how men are when it comes to being in bathrooms. So I like to see the effect of it because it's just very interesting how the conversation goes. Whereas the trans men is usually more laid back, whereas the transgender woman is widely uncomfortable, usually voices their opinions on this, and this is all over bathrooms.
Mr. President, this is my 221st day of publicly transitioning.
God love it.
Thank you. I am extremely privileged to live in a state that allows me access to the resources I need, and that decision is just between me and my doctors.
Well, you can thank Newsom for that. You can blame Newsom. You can blame, I keep saying it, blame. You can thank the whole entire state of California for letting you be as free as who you are. And New York, because everybody knows the blue states get down with stuff like this. You know what I'm saying?
But many states have lawmakers that feel like they can involve themselves in this very personal process. Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming healthcare?
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that. As a moral question and as a legal question. I just think it's wrong. I think I was saying before we started that my deceased son, used to be the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. He passed the broadest piece of legislation that he, as Attorney General, was able to convince the legislature and the governor to sign that dealt with all gender affirming capability. There's a lot of, sometimes they try to block you from being able to access certain medicines, being able to access certain procedures and so on. None of that should be available. No state should be able to do that, in my view.
Well, a lot of people will look at Joe Biden and say, oh, well, he's trying to push it. It's not up to him. I just want people to understand that. Like I said, he just has a job to do. He's just the face of America. That doesn't mean that Joe Biden gets the necessary last word on everything, because we all know that it has to go through Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, and all that other stuff, the conduits to what it is in the White House. But my thing about it is the reason why they probably allow a lot more of these transgenders to get all this stuff out here is because it's big bank, it's big business. Surgery, I believe, and maybe I might be wrong, is more than a multi-million-dollar industry where people is getting surgeries every day, B. You know what I'm saying? So with someone like Dylan Mulvaney that's sitting up there talking about we need to have more access to medicine, i.e. transitional pills or being able to take hormone therapy and all this other stuff. Yeah, of course, the pharmaceutical and drug company is going to go for it because it's big bank, it's big business. Why not have these people out there that want to transition, give them what they want, give them the medicine, make sure they get the surgery and all this other stuff, because it's bringing in millions of dollars, man. So I'm not really surprised that this conversation is going to be had, and that more likely than not, in the future, they're going to allow more stuff like this. It's going to be fine. They're just trying to get more states to turn blue with it. Right now, you still have states that's hung up on it, still holding on to their conservative values. They're saying, we're not down with this. We're not doing that. Especially when they're trying to air out the governor, DeSantis, as being the one that's saying, hey, look, listen, we don't go along with all that other stuff. We don't like that. And if you have a chance, check out the video that I did on Florida with the whole entire Don't Say Gay bill. That was a really pretty interesting conversation about Florida, because the more people that come from blue states bring in their blue state values, and that is a concerning factor to people who live in the state already that hold on to their red values. Therefore, it's going to be a fight to the end to talk about turning that state blue.
So I feel very, very strongly that you should have every single solitary right, including use of your gender identity bathrooms when public.
And my thoughts to that opinion, bro, before we go on, my opinions on that is just give transgenders their own bathroom, man. Everybody wins. If they don't want to go into a male identified bathroom, don't go there. If they don't want to go into a female identified bathroom, don't. They have a private restroom to themselves. And I think there's been, even in the state of California, I remember this one time when I was out there, they had a genderless bathroom when at one of the airports I was at. And I was like, okay, that's how it should really be. You know what I'm saying? They have their own bathroom. They can't complain. They can't feel like the people that are their gender, that's not afraid of knowing that that is their gender. That's who they are. These days, they call it cisgender, biological. They don't feel comfortable with this person coming into their bathroom. Huh?
Thank you. Thank you. And it feels like Republicans have turned trans and non-binary people into this thing to blame society's downfall on in some ways. And this narrative is not only dangerous to our mental health, but also our physical safety. And particularly trans women of color are being murdered at an alarming rate.
And this is something a lot of people need to be aware of. I hate this faux, transgenders of colors, because really who they're relating to is so-called Black people, in my opinion, in which they're trying to come across as if they care for so-called Black people, but then they try to incorporate other races to make it seem as if they're included in this conversation as well. But I know exactly who they're talking to. That's why it's always a broad statement when I hear it.
Any other group of people.
Thank you. How can Democratic leaders be more effective in advocating for us trans people and our families and our lives and our opportunities?
But not being facetious when I say this, being seen with people like you. No, I mean it. I genuinely mean it. People fear what they don't know. They fear what they don't know. And when individuals realize, oh, this is what they're telling me to be frightened of. This is the problem. People change their minds. People just don't know enough to know. And it's not because of intellectual incapability, it's just lack of exposure. And I think that it's really important that we continue to speak out about the basic fundamental rights of all human beings. And the idea that what's going on, in some states, I won't get into the politics of it, but in some states, it's outrageous. And I think it's immoral. The trans part's not immoral. What they're trying to do to trans persons is immoral.
Thank you. And
But the funny thing about that whole entire conversation, and it's not to be rude, it's just to give a real opinion to this conversation. It's funny when you have certain conversations with the so-called LGBTQ, gender fluid, trans, non-binary, and all these different things, because they say, based on what you're saying, is dangerous, right? It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's out of whack. It's violence. You're committing an act of violence all because of what you say. So they weaponize your words against you to make it seem as if you're in the wrong, and constantly are trying to gaslight you for your opinions on what it is that you believe. I mean, it's a free country. If a trans person wants to call me out for what I'm saying, by all means, but don't get mad when I start to sit up there and say something about yourself as well. You understand? And the thing about it is dangerous, this, dangerous, that. This reminds me of the bullying aspect. Too many times in this country, they're becoming too sensitive to conversations. And then that person winds up getting fired, doxxed, and being disrespected on a wide range forefront for being honest and saying how they really feel. Whereas the person, AKA the LGBTQ advocate or member themselves, can directly insult that same person and they are not vilified for what they're saying. It's funny, man.
do you have any messages to the families of trans folks that are seeking, options for their children, but are struggling to find resources? Do you have a message to those parents?
And remember this, because the problem is, it's not just a problem of a lot of people will blame, well, you know, it's television, it's Joe Biden, the Democrats, and, you know, they're doing all this stuff out here. It also starts with the parents as well. I remember one of my first videos I made, I was making a video about how this woman had decided to say that her child, her little boy, is gay. And this was just only a toddler. How would they know that they are gay as a child? You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, when it comes to the psyche as a child, there is experimental elements that a child is going through because they need to understand their environment. They need to understand fellow children. You understand? So I'm not going to get into the conversation. Their actions is automatically quote unquote gay or straight and stuff like that. But the problem is you do have parents of this society who's molding their children to be gay off their own whims, not because they really feel like their child is, or because their child does like one thing automatically. Yeah, I knew my child was this sexuality and stuff like that. No, you didn't know. You didn't know. The child has to, I believe the child needs to come into that for themselves as they get older. Once they start to realize, look, I'm into the same sex, I'm into this different, I'm into the opposite sex, then you just be like, okay, cool. You know what I'm saying? Because once they get to a certain age, they have to make the decisions for themselves. They're not going to go off the opinions of their parents anymore. They're going to go off the opinions of themselves. Could lead them down to a downfall, could be to their own success.
Yeah, I do. This is blood of your blood, bone of your bone. And it is, again, speaking to my son, when he was spent a year in Iraq, and he was a decorated soldier. He volunteered to go, he had to give up the attorney general's job and then came back to it. And he started a foundation I'm not allowed to talk about now because I can't raise money for it any longer. But it was for abused children. And one of the things he did is raise millions of dollars, this organization, to basically educate parents as to what they should not be afraid of, and to educate the community as to what is just pure hyperbole. And so I just think it's a matter of leaders speaking out and saying, as I told you, I mentioned a young woman who used to be on his staff, used to be on my staff, who is now a state senator. And she's trans, and she's a state senator in the state of Delaware, in an area that was historically very conservative, the part of Delaware. And she's running unopposed this time. So things are changing. Things are changing, but it's a matter of
AKA things is becoming indoctrinated. But otherwise than that, that's pretty much the end of this video. Make sure you give your thoughts in the comments and like, share, subscribe. Peace.